Grace Monroe's garage sat like a stubborn outpost on a quiet stretch of highway, where trucks roared past without a glance and the world seemed to forget the little concrete building existed. At 35, Grace was a force of nature, her dark brown hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, hazel eyes sharp with determination, and hands calloused from years of wrestling with engines. Her tools were old, some rusted, others worn smooth from use, but she wielded them with a skill few could match. The garage was her life, her sanctuary, a testament to a childhood spent tinkering with machinery in Greece, where her father taught her the language of bolts and gears. Yet, the town was sleepy, the roads less traveled, and her income barely kept the lights on. Each day was a battle to keep her dream alive, but Grace carried herself with a quiet confidence, a resilience that shone brighter than the dim bulbs overhead. Her beauty wasn't just in her features but in the way she moved, deliberate, unyielding, like someone who'd faced long nights and hard days and come out stronger. One stormy evening, as rain pounded the roof and wind rattled the windows, Grace worked alone in the garage, the scent of oil and wet earth thick in the air. Shadows danced across shelves cluttered with tools, and the flicker of a single fluorescent light cast her silhouette against the wall. She wiped grease from her hands with a tattered rag, her thoughts heavy with the weight of bills and dwindling customers. Then, headlights cut through the storm's roar, and a semi-truck limped into the lot, its engine coughing before falling silent. A man climbed down from the cab, soaked to the bone, his flannel shirt clinging to his frame. He was older, his face weathered by countless smiles, eyes tired but kind. Grace didn't hesitate. She swung open the garage door, rain spraying her face. "Come in, let's get you out of this mess," she called over the wind. The man introduced himself as Jack, his voice low, almost lost in the storm. Grace grabbed her flashlight and got to work, crawling under the truck's hood, her hands steady despite the cold. Hours ticked by as she tightened bolts, replaced a faulty part, and battled the engine's stubborn refusal to start. No fancy equipment, no extra hands, just Grace, her tools, and a will that wouldn't quit. The rain kept falling, relentless, but so was she. Finally, the engine roared to life, a triumphant growl that echoed through the garage. Jack's shoulders sagged with relief. He reached for his wallet, but Grace stopped him with a shake of her head. "You've had a long road," she said softly. "Just get home safe." Jack nodded, his gratitude unspoken but heavy in the air. He climbed into his cab and drove off, the truck's taillights swallowed by the storm. Grace closed the door, leaned against the frame, and let out a tired breath. Hope flickered in her chest, fragile but alive, despite the struggles looming ahead. The next morning, the sky was still heavy with clouds, the air crisp and cool. Grace pushed open the garage door, her boots crunching on wet gravel as she scanned the empty highway. Jack was gone, leaving only the memory of his quiet thanks. Days slipped by in the usual rhythm, small repairs, tired engines, customers who came and went without lingering. Grace worked tirelessly, her hands stained with grease, her spirit unbroken. The hum of tools, the smell of rubber, the steady beat of her determination kept her going. In quiet moments, she thought of that stormy night, the stranger she'd helped, and the spark of connection that lingered. Her neighbors noticed a change in her, a subtle light in her eyes. Mrs. Keller, who ran the diner down the road, stopped by one afternoon with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. "You handled that storm like a pro, Grace," she said, her voice kind. "Not everyone would have opened their door for a stranger in that weather." Grace shrugged, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Just did what felt right. No one should be stranded out there alone." Word spread slowly, like ripples in a still pond. Truckers passing through mentioned the mechanic who worked through a storm without asking for a dime. Grace paid it no mind, focused on keeping her shop open one day at a time. But the story took root, whispered in diners and truck stops, carried along the highways. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Grace sat on the garage steps, wiping sweat from her brow. Her phone buzzed with a message from a neighbor: "You might want to look outside." Curious, she stood and walked around the corner, her breath catching in her throat. Parked beyond the gravel lot was a massive flatbed trailer, gleaming in the fading light. It was loaded with treasures she'd only dreamed of: a hydraulic lift, a full snap-on tool set, a commercial-grade compressor. A man in a delivery uniform stood nearby, smiling politely. "Grace Monroe?" he called. She nodded, heart pounding. "Got a letter for you," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. Grace's hands trembled as she opened it. The words inside hit her like a wave: "My daughter ran a shop like yours. Before cancer took her, she poured her heart into every repair, just like you. I saw her in you that night. I couldn't save her shop, but maybe I can help save yours." It was signed, Jack Rollins, retired CEO. Tears welled in Grace's eyes as the truth sank in. Jack, the weary trucker, wasn't just a man passing through. He was a father carrying a loss that mirrored Grace's own quiet struggles, and he'd seen something in her that night: a fire, a kindness, a refusal to give up. The delivery man waited as Grace stood frozen, the letter shaking in her hands. "Please tell him thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "From the bottom of my heart." Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the sight of the trailer and the hope blooming in Grace's eyes. Mrs. Keller stepped forward, her face alight. "Grace, this is incredible. You deserve every bit of it." The days that followed were a whirlwind. The garage transformed overnight. The hydraulic lift made heavy repairs a breeze, the snap-on tools gleamed beside her old wrenches, and the compressor hummed with promise. Grace stood in the center of it all one evening, her old tools laid out beside the new, a silent tribute to every late night, every struggle. She ran her fingers over a worn wrench, its handle smooth from years of use, and smiled. It was a reminder of how far she'd come, and how far she could still go. Business picked up, slowly at first, then faster. Word spread about the upgraded garage and the woman behind it, a mechanic with skill to rival any and a heart to match. Truckers stopped by not just for repairs but for coffee and stories, their laughter filling the once quiet space. The town's sleepy vibe began to shift, stirred to life by Grace's unyielding spirit and the gift that reminded her she wasn't alone. One quiet evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Grace stood outside, watching the road. She thought of Jack, the man who'd changed everything with one act of kindness. Sometimes, she realized, the smallest moments, a hand extended in the rain, a refusal to ask for payment, could echo louder than a lifetime of work. Weeks later, the garage buzzed with new energy. Repairs that once took hours now flew by with precision. Customers came more often, drawn by the hum of a well-equipped shop and the story of the woman who ran it. But what moved Grace most was the reminder that kindness could come full circle. That rainy night, when she'd chosen to help a stranger without expecting anything, had sparked a ripple of hope that now filled her days. One afternoon, as she finished a brake job on a dusty pickup, a familiar voice called out. She looked up to see Jack Rollins standing at the entrance, his weathered face lit with a faint smile. "Wanted to see how you're doing," he said, stepping inside. His eyes sparkled with quiet pride, the lines of hardship softened by something warmer. Grace felt gratitude swell within her. "Jack, this place, it's alive because of you." He shook his head. "No, Grace. You made it alive. I just helped you see what you already had." They talked for hours, about life on the road, about loss and hope, about his daughter, whose fierce spirit Grace echoed that stormy night. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the garage, Jack paused at the door. "Keep this up," he said. "You're building more than repairs here. You're building a future." He drove off, his truck fading down the highway, but Grace's heart was full. Neighbors and customers gathered around, their smiles a testament to the community she'd helped strengthen. Months passed, and Grace's garage became a hub of activity and warmth, a place where hard work met heart. The flatbed trailer stayed parked nearby, a symbol of a turning point, of hope born from unexpected kindness. One crisp morning, as trucks rolled in and out, their engines humming like a chorus, Grace found a letter on her counter from a local trucking association, inviting her to speak about the power of goodwill. She smiled, remembering the storm, the stranger, and the gift that changed everything. As the day closed, she stood by the open garage door, watching the road. The air smelled of oil and fresh paint, but beneath it was something deeper, a sense of purpose, connection, and community. Grace knew now that one act of kindness could ignite a lifetime of change. Her talents, once overlooked, were celebrated by truckers and townsfolk alike. She mentored young mechanics, sharing not just skills but the lesson that a single moment of compassion could open doors no wrench ever could. And as the sun set, casting golden light over her thriving garage, Grace wiped her hands and took a deep breath. The road ahead was no longer uncertain, it was filled with promise, all because of a stormy night and a choice to help a stranger. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Midnight Tales, and comment where you're watching from. Your support brings more stories like Grace's to life.